Between ages 13 and 30, the record of Jesus' life goes silent, leaving a 17-year biographical blind spot. Moses follows a similar pattern. After 40 years of desert migration, he handed over his authority and disappeared entirely, leaving no record of his resting place. When Jesus eventually re-emerged in Judea, his teachings were a sharp departure from his upbringing. He began preaching a radical doctrine of compassion, nonviolence, and unconditional love, concepts that found no precedent in the local traditions of a wrathful, retributive God. If these ideologies weren't present in the Judeo-Christian tradition of his youth, it raises a difficult investigative question. Where, specifically, was he during those 17 years to have absorbed such an entirely different worldview? Historical theories and ancient local texts suggest these figures were part of a larger, deliberate migration. Their paths point consistently toward the east, eventually terminating in the high-altitude spiritual centers of the Indian subcontinent. Solving these historical cold cases requires more than just tracking physical coordinates. We have to identify the invisible, gravitational force that has historically pulled the world's most significant spiritual figures toward the east. The East and West diverged early in their pursuit of truth. The West developed philosophy, a practice centered on analytical thinking, logic, and the intellectual deconstruction of the world. This analytical gaze allowed the West to master the objective world. It produced the scientific method and industrial revolution, systems solving problems through external observation. India, by contrast, focused its intellectual resources inward. Instead of traditional philosophers, the culture produced seers who practiced darshan, the act of directly experiencing truth through internal awareness, rather than debating it. The core logic of darshan is that truth cannot be reached through logic alone. Much like a blind man who can never understand light through mere description, a person must possess the capacity to see truth before they can know it. For 10,000 years, millions of individuals here prioritized this inner sight over material accumulation. This sustained collective focus on consciousness reportedly created a pneumosphere, a field of spiritual energy that practitioners claim is still palpable in the local environment. For seekers with heightened sensitivity, this concentrated field acts as a destination in its own right. It explains why figures like Pythagoras and the young Jesus, who were searching for inner experience rather than outward science, found themselves moving east to find a space where that search was already complete. Accounts of Jesus' early travels place him first in Egypt, where he reportedly engaged with ancient mystical traditions, emphasizing the hidden dimensions of the spirit. The route then climbed onto the Tibetan plateau and into the Ladakh region. It was here, in these extreme, isolated environments, that he encountered mature Buddhist philosophies of compassion and nonviolence that later defined his ministry. When he eventually returned to Judea, the Eastern concepts he carried were seen as a direct threat to the local authorities. His insistence on love over law led to his arrest and the order for his crucifixion. However, the historical details of that day are anomalous. A standard Roman crucifixion lasted up to 48 hours, but because of the impending Sabbath, Jesus was removed from the cross in under 6 hours, a time frame rarely sufficient for death by such a slow process. This has led to the theory of a strategic compromise, that sympathetic guards and a reluctant Pontius Pilate allowed Jesus to be taken from the tomb while still alive, though in a state of deep unconsciousness. Surviving the cross transformed Jesus into a fugitive. To live out a remainder of his natural life safely, he needed to return to a land that shared his spiritual framework, a place where a master of inner vision could live in peace. Jesus reportedly traveled back to the one place he knew offered the spiritual refuge he required, the high-frequency energy fields of ancient India. Regional traditions in the north describe the arrival of a foreign teacher who took the name of a shepherd. He reportedly lived a quiet, meditative life in the mountains, eventually passing away at the age of 112. His final years were spent in a remote valley in Kashmir called Palagam, a name that translates to the village of shepherds. A tomb still exists in this region today, bearing Hebrew inscriptions that honor the memory of a great teacher who sought silence and sadhana, discipline. Parallel accounts suggest Moses shared this same destination, traveling out of the Middle East to these identical Kashmiri valleys to spend his final years in total anonymity. The decision of these masters to die in this specific land is rooted in the Indian understanding of mortality. Here, death is viewed as a profound spiritual transition. By dying within a highly charged spiritual field, the end of life becomes a celebration of liberation. Most visitors come here to document India's physical monuments, seeing only its material history. They miss the country's actual wealth, an invisible 10,000-year-old legacy of consciousness that quietly continues to call truth seekers home.